So, I'm going to start here with a story. Recently, I started, despite my reservations about the online security and all, I said, I'm going to open up an e-banking account to make my life easy. And I started it. But I forgot the password. So I spent half an hour trying to look for where is that forgot password button so I can reset it. I looked and I looked. It turns out there isn't. If I want to reset my password, I have to call the bank, change it, get them to start it, come back, and then start using the virtual thing. It frustrated me. You go, and then after having lived abroad for 13 years, coming back to 18-hour power outages, that's another thing that really got to me. Whenever I have these little incidences, big incidences, I always go back to my economics classroom. My econ professor asked the class, what is that one thing you can give, you can export to developing country to help them? And a lot of us said, for indirect investment. We said technology transfer, a bunch of other stuff. He basically shook his head. It's like, no, it's management skills. And that time, I quietly protested in my head, are you serious? Obviously, we have managers in Nepal. Obviously, we have good management skills. But after more than a decade of staying abroad and coming back to Nepal after 2015 Gorkha earthquake, that silent protest has been challenged many times. Most of the people I've met, be it CEOs, be it founders of established companies, be it mid-level managers, be it senior managers, C-suite, most of them have usually said, productivity छैन. The productivity is low in Nepal. It's मान्छेहरूको accountability छैन. People are not very accountable, or they're not very resourceful. They cannot solve problem on their own. It's gone up to a point where you go to a party palace, somebody is having a wedding, and there is somebody scooping the ice cream, and there's a long line. And then the guy next to me says, well, when I was in Australia and I was working, scooping ice cream, I could cater to 20 people at the same time. How come there is such a long line? Look at that person. The person doesn't even have hot water. The person is not scooping fast enough. There are a lot of things, little things, right? Not super big things. And obviously, these conversations lead to, it's the politicians. It's like, that's that. It's where our macroeconomics is not stable. It's very easy to point a finger at politicians because maybe they deserve it, and just skip away. But having been a consultant and been in consultancy space in Nepal and as a executive coach and a trainer, I've noticed a couple of patterns. And those are some of the cultural hindrances that I've discovered that might prevent us from reaching our potentials, right? So the first thing I notice is we respect age a lot in this country, in this part of the world, which is great. We need to respect the wisdom that comes with the age. As soon as we meet somebody, we say, which batch of SLC are you in, which batch of A-level? And we start saying, relative to us, which year was that person born? And we start saying dai, didi, bai, baini, which basically is older brother, older sister, younger brother, younger sister. We have that level of intimacy that gives comfort, which is great. But it turns the entire society into a big family. And what do we do in family? We try to keep peace. We try to not disagree. We try to make sure, even if you have like an idea that goes against the father, you try to bite your tongue and say, Sohansu, I'll make it work. Now take that and put it in a work setting. How does that translate? So we ran a survey among managers and the C-suite, and this is what we found. 60%, over 60% of people felt when they are in a meeting and they happen to be a senior person, age-wise, they feel pressure, they need to know the answer, right? The same responded, flip on the other side. When they are in a meeting and there's somebody senior in that meeting, they feel pressure because they think somebody senior already knows the answer, and whatever they're going to say is not going to be so useful. So what that does is you've got this young generation that probably has the latest knowledge that is there, created by science, whatever, created by new industry, that does not get flown to the older generation. There is this barrier, there's this mental block that says, somebody already knows more than I do. What I'm going to say is not going to be relevant. And the older people are put in such a pedestal that it's difficult for them to say, I actually don't know. Can you tell me what Bitcoins are, right? What blockchain is? It makes it difficult. But what has happened in our world, outside Nepal, is landscape is changing. Automation is going to take away a lot of jobs that our folks go out and do in Middle East. So the remittance income is at threat. We are bombarded on Facebook with the expectations from life, which means our compensation package needs to change, similarly to address to the workers who get bombarded by those social media messages. We need to start adjusting. But that adjustment is not going to happen if we keep thinking it's only the experience that matters, it's only with seniority you get all that knowledge. No, we need to tap into the PhDs who have been working in that particular field, innovating and developing and mixing that up with experience. But that is one barrier we need to overcome. The next thing that I noticed is the way we look at relationships in this country. Nepal is a very relationship-based country, right? We need to get something done. We try to think, oh, this particular uncle probably knows this particular person. So we try to find somebody who knows somebody else in that department, and we ask for favors. And we keep it in that memory bank. And at some point, we repay the favor, right? Not a bad way of working. It's pretty good. It's a relationship-based country. That's how usually it works, which is fantastic. But what does that mean? So the respondent said, 50% of the respondents said, Nepal's circle is so small that you will exhaust the key people you need to know in almost every sector that exists within 3 months. So we live in a society that is so tiny that you exhaust it out very fast. And it's also relationship-based. What does that mean? We have almost non-existent to very minimal feedback loop, critical feedback loop that you need to weed things out. Obviously, we need to focus on people that needs to improve, but we also need to focus on people who are fantastic. So that messaging, that signaling gets a little bit lost, right? It's not that newspapers don't publish about some of the crazy atrocities that happen, but we as society have public amnesia. We forget. After a day or two, we are very happy taking selfie with the same person whose photo was pasted all over a newspaper for something that was done wrong, right? We really focus on having strong relationship, at least at a superficial level. For a newcomer, the signals get completely lost and we don't know. So how does this relate to workplace? So the respondents said, 43% of the respondents said that they have rarely got any feedback from their peers. What does that mean? You end up being surrounded by yes people, yes friends, and you start creating a bubble and you start living in that bubble where you think everything is fine and dandy, or you think your own projection of where you need to improve becomes the only projections of where you need to improve. You don't get an external perspective. So this is one area where, from a cultural standpoint, because Nepal is a tiny circle as people perceive it to be, we have very weak feedback loop that helps to distinguish between awesome and not so awesome. Great, you need to replicate it, to not so great, you don't want to replicate it and you fix it, right? And then finally, the third area that I discovered is our expectations from the education system. I've worked with so many young people, well, MBA people, who have never worked in their life. So my question to them is, why did you go for your MBA if you haven't even worked? It's a master's level, it's a specialization level. If you've never worked, what's the point, right? But there exists. The MBA schools don't require work experience at all. Furthermore, we have a lot more graduates in Bachelor's of Social Work than we do in IT. or than we do in STEM, which is also very interesting because as a developing country that needs to actually think 10 steps ahead and figure out how do we not miss the boat of AI, of innovation, of automation, where a lot of these things, a lot of our remittance money is reliant on, we are really ill prepared. Furthermore, almost every respondent said this. I asked them a question, what do you wish the education sector did for students? And everybody without fail said, education sector needs to make sure it teaches critical thinking, practical, hands-on technical skills, so people know how to actually work and they know how to work with the team and deliver. So this, how we perceive education, and it's mostly the parents who seems to be forcing these kids to just go from bachelor's to MBA to other master's level specialization degree as if they are going from 7th grade to 8th grade. So there is a lot of work, cultural work that needs to happen, and a mindset shift that needs to happen, at least in the education sector. But let's put all of this in perspective, right? I feel we are in this very stable equilibrium, which we probably don't want to be, and it's going to take some very ambitious person and sort of a bit of collective thinking, but at a micro level. I'm not talking big things at all. I'm talking what you can do, individuals can do, one institution can do. So you've got a student who goes through the education system under the pressure of the parents to get a master's degree, whatever degree. The students are not taught hands-on practical skills according to the industry. Then the kid joins a company where 43% of the time the person is not going to know what the person is doing good, what they need to improve on, right? So there's that circle. And then the person joins a social circle where most of the signals that the person is going to get is just everything is fine and dandy without realizing what needs to be fixed, right? And add that onto the social circle that already exists, it's like a perfect vortex. It's like a perfect equilibrium. Nobody has any real intention of taking risk and speaking out and giving honest feedback because the risks are too high. The stakes are too high of living in a society that is such a small circle where everything happens on relationship basis. So who is going to take the risk? It's a stable equilibrium, it feels like, but not the one where we want to be. We need to move out of it, even though it's going to be uncomfortable. So let's think about what can be done. And time and again, I keep giving example of this one person that I have huge amount of respect, which I feel all of us can respect, is Kulman Gising. We went from a country of 18 hours of power cuts. And Nepalis, the way we do, we say, yes, they saw, what do? We buy inverters, we wake up at middle of night to pump water up, to charge our phones, our batteries, and we live on. But this one person with proper management motto, with a proper management zeal, and with a vision, is able to take a country out of 18 hours of power cuts to no power cuts at this point. Obviously, there were problems with corruption and leakages, but more than that, it really seems like there was management issue. He's importing more, right? It really comes down to management skills. And what are some of the other areas where I have seen management skills lacking? Is basically every other sector. If we had managers like Kulman Gising, let's say in Department of Road, in banking sector, we probably wouldn't have to pay for password reset every time we forgot the password. We probably would have a forgot password button right there. There would be a way for the banks with all the information to be able to digitally identify who we are, and we might not need to show up, right? There's a lot of efficiency we are losing because we don't have this culture and this acceptance of barriers that exist, and we are not addressing it. So, what are some of the things that I think we can do to address this? First, we need to address the education sector. We need to start not just studying Jack Welch's management style, not just how Netflix has this unlimited holiday policy, or how some country is going towards 4 days weekday, but we need to start thinking what works for Nepal, what is contextual for Nepal. You know, we like to point fingers at the politicians, but we have to admit they have been able to retain that position for a very long time. What is their management skill? What is their management style? If witty one-liners and silly jokes are what it takes to get Nepali people behind an idea, then giving a very posh speech in English is not going to get us there. We need to have managers, we need to have people who are going to be able to deliver the same kind of jokes to get people behind some initiatives, right? So first, I think we need to do something about this education sector. We need to focus on education, particular majors that's going to get this country and position it for an era where a lot of jobs are going to be lost to automation. And we need to start thinking about what are some of the strategic investments and cultural adjustment we need to make. Maybe it's a mass education of parents saying your kid really doesn't need to go for MBA unless he or she has worked for at least 3 years and knows what she or he wants. The second thing we want to do is really, at an organization level, realize there are these cultural barriers of age, there are these cultural barriers of relationship that not just promotes the tightness and this super nice feeling of being with a family, but what does that prevent? Is innovation happening at the pace it should happen? Or are people unable to share the information in an unbiased and without the feeling that they are going to be judged? Finally, I think we all need to start saying, you know, yes, Nepal's social circle is very small, but it is worthwhile to have a candid feedback on people's performance, on organizations' performance, so that we can not necessarily weed out the bottom performers, but actually help them realize these are the areas you need to improve. These are the standards we need to maintain. Yesterday, I discovered there is actually somebody, it has created this page called Kill Plagiarism. So if you Google Kill Plagiarism Nepal, you will have this web page with all the names of people who've plagiarized with evidence. What is the original source? What is the plagiarized source? And it is heartbreaking to look at that list when you see vice chancellors and department heads who are plagiarizing, or people who are leading some business social unit plagiarizing. But that needs of filtration needs to happen. So we know who are the people that we want to work with and who are the people we don't want to work with, right? There needs to be a level of filtration. And then finally, I feel if we were to address these basic things, look, I'm not asking us to tackle politicians, I'm not asking us to tackle corruption, nothing big. I'm asking us to really go back to our organizations and see, do we have a 360, very candid feedback session? Do we have a culture that takes what is good in our culture and tries to address the areas that we need to address that might be creating management barriers? Can we create people like Kulman Gising? I mean, he has created allies, he has used media judiciously, but he has been able to give us our life back of electricity, from dark ages back to modernity. So I do think it's possible, but I do think it's up to all of us to literally go back, do some soul searching, and say, all right, these are going to be my criteria, and this is how I am going to make sure there is going to be a good management body in every organization, in every part of society. Imagine what would happen if we had people like Kulman Gising in road department, in water department, in air pollution department. Our quality of life would be a lot better. We probably would have more parks, more greenery, and simply just a better quality of living at a basic level in general. Thank you.